I'm Dana K. White. I am the author of Decluttering at the Speed of Life, and today I'm just going to share my story of how I became the person who talks about decluttering for a living on the internet and writes books about it. It was a big surprise to me that this is where my career took me. And my son Reed is my editor, as many of you know. And he mentioned over the summer, he said, Mom, you've never really told your backstory on how you got to where you are talking about decluttering and home management for a living on YouTube. I've told it other places. So if you follow me everywhere, if you listen to the podcast and you read the books and you have read the blog for years, you may have heard this story, but I think it needs to live here on YouTube as well, because some of you, that's the only place that you follow me. So how did I end up doing this for a living? Well, this is literally the last thing I ever would have thought I would be teaching for a living. I mean, if you had told me that I would write books about home management and clutter, I would have laughed and or cried because clutter was my biggest struggle. My space, my physical space, was always out of control for the vast majority of my life. I was a messy child with a messy bedroom, drove my mama crazy. I had the messy desk when I was in school. I had a messy locker. I had the locker in high school where when I opened it, everything fell out, right? I had a messy dorm room in college. I had a messy apartment when I was single. But honestly, I assumed that once I got married, it was going to be easy. Because I thought at that point it's going to matter, right? Like the other parts of my life, I had been focused on other things. And so even though it drove me bananas that my spaces were the way that they were, I always thought, well, I have a lot of other things going on in my life right now. That's not my focus. That is less important to me. And so I will get it together at some point in my life. And so I thought, well, once it matters to me what my home looks like, that's when it will be easy. And I got married and it wasn't easy. And I was a little surprised, but I still wasn't worried because I thought, you know what? Once I have kids and I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom, that was my plan, that was my dream. I was like, once I'm a stay-at-home mom, then of course my house will be under control. Like, duh, right? How would it not be under control? Because that will be the thing that I'm doing. Right? Like that, my house is going to be my job. And I'd always been very successful at other things in life. I had always done well in jobs. I had learned things, figured out, tackled them, done well. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to do that with my house once that's my job, right? Well, haha, not funny at all. Even people who used to be organized tend to struggle a lot more when they have kids. And so I had kids and I was not magically cured the way that I assumed that I was going to be magically cured. And it hit me one day. It was actually my oldest child, who is now 23. He was 4 months old and I was getting him dressed in his room and I looked around and his room was a mess. He was 4 months old. And that was when it hit me that this had not just happened. And I realized, okay, I think there's actually something wrong with me. Okay. And please do not get offended yet. I mean, I'm sure I'll say something else offensive, but don't get offended when I say that, right? I'm just being honest about the thoughts that went through my brain. Like, this is not supposed to be this hard. And I am trying. It is my focus. I do care. And I can't do this thing. And it seems like it's easy for everybody else. And I really, at that point, became very frustrated and despaired over this issue. And I kept trying. And I kept looking for methods and I kept doing what I could do, and I would do great for a week or two, sometimes 3 weeks, and then life would happen and it would go right back to being a disaster. And my previous strategies that I had always used throughout my life, which was to spend a whole weekend that I had set aside. Okay, this is going to be the weekend. I'm going to get the house perfect. And I would work myself to absolute exhaustion, and the house would be perfect, right? Because I had shoved everything into my bedroom where I could lock the door, and everything else was great, right? I would sit back and go, okay, I did it. All right, I've just got to keep it this way. But I didn't know how to keep it that way, right? Also, I hadn't actually gotten rid of a lot of stuff. And so therefore, the things that I had shoved into one room just drifted back into their spaces, and it just went back to being a disaster again and again and again. And every time that happened, I felt more despair. And it was harder to make myself do the big project clean again the next time, because I was like, what is the point? Like, it doesn't ever seem to work. I don't know what I'm doing differently than other people. So I've shared a lot about actually how I have changed my home and what I have figured out. So here I'm just telling kind of my story. So in April of 2008, I discovered blogs. I wanted to be a writer, and I was a theater arts teacher before I had kids, so I have this creative itch inside of me, and I thought, I want to write. Like, that was something else that I was passionate about, and I thought that would be a great creative outlet. I didn't really know at the time that I have an entrepreneurial itch as well, but I thought, I want to be a writer. I don't know how to do this, but that's something I'm going to try to figure out once my kids are in school. And it was April of 2008 when I discovered blogs, and I was like, what? That's what I need to be doing, right? Like, people are writing and they're turning it into businesses. Like, they're becoming writers by having blogs. And I was like, that's it. That's what I've got to do. So I had this burning desire inside of me to have a blog. But I didn't start a blog for a year and a half because my house was a disaster. And I thought, I have got to get my house under control first. Like, I know myself. I throw myself into projects, especially creative projects. And I have got to figure out the house thing first. I'm like, okay, I've got this new motivation to get my house under control. And I still couldn't do it. Like, I still could not get my house under control. Tried and tried and tried. Same old story, right? People often ask, so how bad was it? I could absolutely have people over. I just needed 2 weeks to get ready. That's it. I would take a week to declutter, which at the time was just stuff shifting. It was moving things into my bedroom where I could lock that door. And then I would spend the second week cleaning, because you can't actually clean when there's clutter everywhere, right? And then it would go back to being a disaster after the party, right? And I couldn't do it. Okay, so that year and a half I was trying to, and I was getting more and more frustrated because it was keeping me from doing this thing that I was desperate to do. And it was in August of 2009, and Reed, who edits my videos, who is now 21 as I'm recording this, was about to start kindergarten. And I was only going to have my daughter, who is 3, at home. And I was sitting in church. It was the day before he went to kindergarten. And I was not listening to the sermon. I'm just being honest. I was praying. But it wasn't a happy prayer. It was a frustrated prayer. God had not answered my prayer to make me organized, because I had prayed, please make me organized. Please take this issue away. Please help me figure this out. Please help solve this problem. Please make me not messy anymore. Please cure this messiness, right? The next day was going to be the day that it made total sense for me to start my blog, right? Like, I had all these ideas. I had done all this research, but I hadn't started because I wanted to get my house under control first, because my house was debilitatingly messy. I was only going to have one kid at home. And when she went down for a nap, I was actually going to have an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to write. Where for the 6 years before that, it had always been coordinating nap times. You know, one kid falls asleep and you hold your breath till the next one falls asleep, and then they might overlap for an hour if you're lucky, right? But this was going to be the time. This was the time where it made total sense for me to start, and I couldn't because God hadn't answered my prayer. And I was frustrated because I felt like God was calling me to write. Like, this was a dream and a desire and a gift, honestly, that he had put inside of me. And I was not able to do that because of my house. And God was like, yeah, write about that. And I was like, what? Okay, actually, that's a really good idea, God. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to write about getting my house under control. And 3-4 months, maybe, tops, right? Everything will be perfect. My house will be under control. And then I can start writing about the things that I actually feel qualified to write about. Right then, the name of my blog came to me, A Slob Comes Clean. And I was like, okay, that's actually a really catchy title, but I had never called myself a slob before. Like, I had often said, it's not like I'm a slob, right? Because I liked things clean. I did work hard on my house. It didn't show, but I was trying really hard. And so I didn't want to use that word, but I could not think of another word, even though I wanted to be a writer. I could not think of another word. And this experiment, this practice blog that I was going to write was like, I just had to get it done right away. I mean, I went home, I started the next day, but I started anonymously. Had no intention, did not want anyone I knew ever to find out about this blog. My goal was to get my house under control, do this anonymously, get to learn about blogging, right? So that when I was able to actually write about the things I was qualified to write about, at that point, I would know what I was doing. I would have some experience, right? Okay, so set up a new email address, made up a name, called myself Noni, short for anonymous. So I was Noni Blanco. Blanco is Spanish for white. So that was my name. And didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. And I just started writing about what I was doing. And I was not teaching anything. I was literally just figuring it out. Journaling. I did daily checklists of like, okay, this is what I did today. I would write about like my hangups and, why do I resist doing this thing? Oh my goodness, I just noticed this. Why have I not noticed that before? I was figuring it out, writing about it as I was going. And people were reading the blog. This was in the day where blogs were the thing, right? Not social media. And people started to comment. And I honestly assumed that the first comment would be, get off the internet. You're a horrible person. You're a horrible mom. You should be ashamed of yourself and all that. Because that's how I felt about myself, right? And I honestly thought I was the only one. So that's why it was all anonymous. But as people started to read it, they started to say, these are my thoughts. This is how it works in my house. This is how my brain works too. I've never heard anybody say what you're saying and I always thought I was the only one. Like that's what they were telling me, right? And in those days, when you had a comment on your blog, it was a Google blog on Blogspot or whatever, and you would click on their name and they would have a profile. And so I got a comment and I would go look at who this person was. I was like, oh my goodness, somebody's like saying nice things to me and that they understand. And I started to see that the people who were saying that they related to my struggles and how my brain worked were all highly creative, intelligent women. Now, remember how I didn't want to call myself a slob, right? But because I had called myself a slob and because it was anonymous, I was being completely honest. Like, what is there to lose after you've called yourself a slob, right? By being honest and then other people saying, those are my thoughts too, that's how my brain works too. And then seeing that these were highly creative, intelligent women, it helped me see, oh, this is how my brain works, right? Like I never call anybody else a slob. I don't encourage you to call yourself a slob. It is a fighting word. I mean, it's not a nice word, right? But it set me on a path of total honesty. And the total honesty helped me find my people. And finding my people helped me make that connection that this is how my brain works. I am highly creative. Related to that high level of creativity, which I'm very thankful that God made me creative. Like it's my favorite part about myself, right? That creative brain that I have is directly related to my struggles with stuff. I can organize people, but when it comes to the stuff in my house, I was just completely bumfuzzled by it, right? So as I continued to write on the blog and people started following, my husband, I did tell him about a month in, and it's so funny because I honestly thought that he would be horrified that I was putting out pictures of our messy house on the internet. Real pictures. They're still there at slobcomesclean.com. I thought he would be horrified by that. Instead, his frustration was that I wouldn't let him tell anybody what I was doing because he was so proud of me. As he said, I'm just so excited you're finally actually doing one of your ideas. Because I had always, was always having all these ideas, and blogging was one of those ideas that I've been talking about. He was just excited I was really doing one of them, right? So I finally told him, but I didn't tell anybody else. I mean, I eventually told my parents, and my best friend, but this was a big secret. I didn't tell people what I was doing, even though it was starting to become a big part of my life, right? That I was doing this. But as I was writing, I would say the first 2.5 years, I resisted answering anybody's questions, right? I was like, no. People would say, teach us what you're doing. Please tell us how to do what you're doing. Because I was truly changing my home as I was focusing on it, right? And writing about it. And I would always say, just read the blog from the beginning and figure it out, because nobody should ever take any kind of cleaning or decluttering or organizing advice from me. That's what I would say. I was like, and I just was like, why? No, not me. Because in my mind, I was thinking of all the times when I wanted to get my house under control, and I was picturing the magazine pictures, right? Now we say Pinterest pictures, but that didn't exist back then. But I was picturing the magazine photos of beautiful homes, and that's what I was wishing I could get to. And so I was thinking, I can't tell anybody how to do that, right? I'm just figuring this out. Don't ask me how to do it. I'm just figuring it out. And about 2.5 years in, after people were saying, please tell us what you're doing. And I had a blogging friend who was sick one day and read all the way through my blog, and she would send me texts all the time. She was like, you have to do a guide to teach people how to get their houses under control. And it hit me. I was like, oh, I can't tell someone how to have a perfect house, but I can tell somebody how to have hope. And that was when I wrote an ebook called 28 Days to Hope for Your Home. It is now it's included, I just dropped my new book. It's now included in this book. This was my first traditionally published book that came out. But I wrote that, and it changed everything. It shifted me into, oh, okay, this is my place. I'm not going to pretend to be something that I'm not. But I do have hope to offer, because I have figured out how to go from not understanding why this is so hard and what it is that I'm missing that other people seem to be born knowing, to knowing what to do. If you are here to find out how to have a gorgeous, well-decorated, beautiful home, this is not the channel for that. But if you want to figure out how to declutter, I'm here for you. I can absolutely teach you how to do that. So that's how I came to this point. And then obviously that, moved into podcasts and YouTube and traditionally published books and all of that. And this is what I do. I started out because I wanted to be a writer, and I get to be a writer. I have written 4 books now, including my newest book. You want to see it? My newest book is Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. So this is the spiritual side of everything. And anyway, I know that that's not of interest to all of you, but there are a lot of us who are Christian women who have really felt a lot of shame over this issue, and that shame has gotten mixed up spiritually. And so in this book, I am trying to just share what God's shown me over these years. But yeah, that is my story of getting my house under control, sharing it on the internet, getting to do what I was created to do. That is nothing at all like what I assumed it was going to look like. So, but it's so much better. This is so much more fun because I don't have to hide anything. And when I talked earlier about accepting that this is how my brain works, that was critical in this process for me. Not because it meant that I said, oh, well, this is how my brain works, so I'm just gonna let my house be a disaster. I didn't want my house to be a disaster, okay? That's the most misunderstood thing about those of us who struggle in our homes is people who think, oh, well, you must just like living that way. And we're like, no, we don't, but it doesn't seem to work. Anything that we try doesn't seem to work, right? So that acceptance that my brain works this way was not an excuse to say, oh, well, my house will just be messy. It freed me to say, oh, that is why traditional organizing advice never made sense to me, because most organizing advice is written by organized people. Their brains work very differently from the way my brain works. And so while they're sharing great things, there's this gap, right? Like their before pictures were my dream after pictures when I got started. I was lost on page 3. I didn't understand, because I didn't understand things like the container concept. I didn't understand that, you know, the one in, one out rule. That never made sense to me before. I didn't understand the power of doing maintenance tasks when my house was a disaster, because I was like, well, why would I want to maintain this? No. Okay, so all of those things that I have figured out were skipped in most of the things that I had read because they were written by people who were naturally organized, right? And so accepting how my brain works freed me to actually start to make progress. And accepting how my brain works meant that I was freed from the shame. And a lot of that freedom from shame came from you, because you shared that I was not alone. And so that's why it's so important for me to make sure that you know, if you are struggling in your home, that you are not alone and there really is hope. So, okay, that's my rambling short version of my story. So all those blog posts are still there at aslobcomesclean.com. And you can actually go see those before pictures. I've left up YouTube videos from over 10 years ago when I was still in the process of figuring it all out. Those YouTube videos are still on here, and it's painful. I don't like them being on here because I'm like, no. Like my whole master bedroom clean out is one that I now am like, no, I don't do it that way. But I was stumbling through and I was figuring things out as I went. And it's a way for you to get to see, oh, she does understand. Oh, she's talking about real clutter when she talks about what her house looked like. So I hope this was helpful. I'll talk to y'all more next week. If you want to pre-order Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House, the link is below, and I do have some pre-order bonuses for that. Okay, bye y'all.